I've been wanting to do this for a while, and I touched on it in my biodiversity episode in the last season of Late Bloomer. But I love when you have a small space garden to mix it up. When I was in England last year, of course the focus was on flowers in most of the gardens I visited, but everything was so mixed up, heights and colors and shapes and sizes. And I came back with this desire to completely mix it up. And I also got the bug from Epic Yard Farm in Phoenix, of course. Jack Davis loves to mix things up and keep things really interesting and compact and densely planted. I just wanted to go through my garden today because we're not having a work day this week. Eric is doing some traveling, and I wanted to give you an idea of the crazy wild mixing it up I did this year in my garden. Some of which happened by accident, volunteers, some of which was planned. So, here we go. Now this is a volunteer potato. This is the Sweet Annie I planted. Little pepper packs a punch. Oh, what have we here? Those little black dots are pheromones that are scent glands that attract the female. And this is the beauty of growing milkweed, because you turn around in your garden and you see one of these beautiful creatures that has just eclosed from its chrysalis. Not sure what that is. German chamomile growing out of the strawberry pot. These petals are edible, and the sweetest edible flower you'll eat. Now we have a damselfly or dragonfly, which is a beneficial insect, right here. In this pot we have a tomato, sweet potato. There were sweet potatoes growing in these pots, and I cut all the leaves back because they looked terrible. So the sweet potatoes are coming back. I have basil and tomato. Over here I have, I believe this is garlic with a little, what's left of a pepper plant. This is a volunteer squash plant that Eric repotted when I was gone. He potted it into here, and there's something else growing in here. Some kind of flower, I think. these are my green manure legumes starting to grow back after being cut back. And in each one of these pots, right in the middle, I put a squash seed. So we'll see what happens with that. This is chard left over from the winter. I get sun in my back driveway in this spot from about May, June, part of July. So these are my asparagus pots. I have 5 of them. And as you know, asparagus does nothing for 9 or 10 months out of the year, and then it sprouts up in the spring. And so I thought, let me use the surface of those pots to grow arugula. So I've been eating that for breakfast every morning, and now it's getting hotter and it's all starting to bolt, so that's pretty much done. But what's interesting is in almost all of these pots, I have a volunteer winter squash coming up. I suppose the seeds were in my compost, I don't know, but I've got one here, I've got one here, I've got a big one here coming up in this pepper plant, and a big one coming up in this sweet potato planter in the back. These are my sweet potato planters. We cut all of the vines and the leaves back because they looked horrible. And as they were coming back, I decided to just put my new pepper seedlings in there to get them up off the ground, a little more sun. So I have about 37 of those pepper seedlings. I don't know how many of these things are going to do well, but we'll see. But all together we have sweet potatoes, winter squash, arugula, asparagus, peppers, and I have 2 apricot sprouts here from my neighbor's apricot tree. I'm sitting under my only birch tree. This and my pine tree are really my only 2 trees that aren't fruit trees. And I love this birch tree because it's pretty. I have my hummingbird feeder here. My hummingbirds nest in these bushes right behind it, and it's a great cover for wildlife. But the problem is where I'm sitting and this whole section where I'm pointing to, the roots of the birch tree, I tried for years. Nothing that I planted there would work. So I had to put in weed barrier, or I have to grow in pots. So that's what I've got going here. These are pots. This is weed barrier, pots, and so forth. So I created this little bed about that big of garlic, which you saw in a video. And underneath it, it has the cloth to keep the roots out. And one little borage sprouted up in the middle, and I thought, oh, let that go. One little sprout. That is the result. The thing about borage is it grows so fast and it gets so top heavy with these tiny little roots that once it gets to be about 3 or 4 feet tall, it starts to droop over, as you can see with this plant. Now this bed, which I call my back 40, it was my sweet pea bed. Sweet peas were a complete bust this year, except for about 3 vines, and that was the second planting. So it was time to put in tomatoes. I didn't take the peas out, so I've got the tomatoes, the peas, all this borage, and then I've got the shallots down the middle and garlic down the side. I've got shiso, basil, and I guess that's it. You find a way to make things work together, to mix it up. Another funny thing that's happened is, some by accident, some not, is, for example, in this one pot with this snapdragon, there's a potato, volunteer. There are Jerusalem artichokes, because I think that I planted the snapdragon in the pot with some Jerusalem artichokes. I don't know if you remember, but I mentioned that I was going to be planting some squash seeds out in the valley at a friend's house. That never happened. So I thought, I haven't planted any winter squash. I haven't planted a single cucumber seed. And so the other day I took a handful of various seeds and I just went around. Any pot that had a little bit of an empty space in it, stuck it in there. So we'll see what happens. But I just like to keep things interesting, because when you walk out and you just go, wow, there's that and that and that and that and that and that, and it's a feast for the eyes. This is lemon verbena, which is blooming, and it's beautiful. It smells divine. So make sure you get some lemon verbena in your garden, that with the little tiny white flowers. These white flowers behind me are all cilantro that I've let go to flower because I want to collect the seeds. These pots that we planted a couple of videos ago are really doing well. This is shiso. This is Sweet Annie, which is one of your best smelling things in the garden. Another reason to mix things up is it confuses pests, or so they say. If you see a whole bed of cucurbits, for example, the cucurbit pests are going to go, ooh, it's a field day. But if you mix things up, it confuses them and they won't destroy your whole crop. Now, I don't know if that applies to mildew. It probably doesn't, because mildew is rampant. If you study mildew online, it says that there are different mildews for cucurbits, for roses, for tomatoes, and they're all different strains. And just because you have a squash plant beside a tomato plant, it doesn't mean that the mildew here is going to be the same mildew here. I find that very hard to believe, but maybe it's true. But we have been vigilant spraying this year, and the one thing I forgot to remind Eric to spray was my sweet peas. The leaves are covered in mildew. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to harvest these sweet peas and spray them. That I will do. One thing I'm really concerned about is my orange Thai chili, which I love to have every year. You know, I did a major serious pruning on a 1-year plant and a 2-year plant, and they do not look good, and they look like they're coming back with that same disease that I've been struggling with my peppers. Another reason to mix things up is it gives cover for wildlife. You can easily register your garden or yard with the National Wildlife Federation by providing food sources, water, and cover for them to raise their young. I did, and the other day I saw hummingbirds, lizards. Of course, I always have raccoons here, but I'm not usually up when they're out prowling, and they're not really welcome. While I was in Sierra Madre, my pineapple guavas exploded with blooms. I have never seen so many blooms on any plant in my life. The pineapple guavas, oh my goodness, I don't have enough bees to pollinate all those flowers. You know, maybe if I didn't have them so obsessed on my African blue basil, they might all be out on my pineapple guavas. They're a wonderful fruit tree for our microclimate here. They do really well here. There are moments of tranquility in an urban garden, and this is one of them. I don't hear a plane, I don't hear a garbage truck, no one's driving back and forth, no delivery trucks, no weed whackers or leaf blowers, which you hear all day, every day except Sunday. And it brings peace into your heart. I am so in love with gardening now that even if I wasn't trying to produce food for myself, I would be doing it just for my own mental health. When you live in a big city like New York, or where most people live in apartments, almost everyone lives in an apartment in New York. I lived in an apartment in New York. I didn't have a balcony. I didn't even have a window box. We were on the 9th floor. There was no chance of gardening unless you had an indoor plant. So I'm very fortunate to have this opportunity at this part of my life. Even if you have a little tiny corner, even if it's on your desk in your office, you can get an air plant on your desk in your office that doesn't even require soil. But just to see plants living and growing before your eyes, it offers you some some peace in your heart and some serenity in your soul that nature provides, and I don't know much else that can do what nature can do in terms of parrots. Little do they know, I have planted some sunflower seeds. Now they're in pots because everything out front is packed. So we'll see if they have the nerve to come within 5 feet of my front door. Thanks so much for watching this channel, liking my videos, and sharing them with your friends. And I'll see you in the next one.